Today on Business Growth Talks, we have Alan Versteeg, who is an engineer turned sales management expert who has revolutionized the sales world by applying engineering principles of cause and effect to sales strategies. Initially skeptical about the sales profession, Alan embraced it with a unique perspective that has led to remarkable success. He co-founded Matters International, a firm dedicated to sales and sales management excellence, which has trained over 2,000 sales managers across 45 countries. Through Growth Matters, Alan helps businesses achieve sustainable growth and empowering sales managers, the custodians of the execution. Just a quick one. I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining me today and being with me on this show. One thing that is really, really important I want to share with you is this show is growing really well, and I'm so proud of it, and I'm so pleased that you're enjoying this content. But if you could please hit the follow and subscribe to this channel, it will really help the channel on its being able to grow and the people that we can have on this show. So please do consider, if you have a moment, please can you hit the subscribe button and the follow button, and I would really appreciate it. Hello, Alan. How are you today?
Great to be here, Mark. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's going to be an interesting story. So you're based in South Africa. You work across the globe when it comes to your clients. So I think an international business is something that we do have on the show, but I think it's going to be an interesting take on seeing how you've grown and how you've been able to do that in such an international way. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
As always on this show, the first question I ask is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
For me, a business mindset is the understanding that as long as the business owns you, you're an entrepreneur. To be a business owner, the business needs to be your servant, not the other way around. And I think it's a journey, but often we say we're a business owner, but in actual fact, we're working 20, 22-hour days to get through. So a business mindset is the ability to create a business that you don't grow to hate, is what my friend Dan Martell would say.
Interesting. So is it working for a business or working in a business for you?
I think it's having the business work for you. So initially you got to work in the business, then you got to start stepping away, working on the business, and then building to a point where the business works for you.
Yeah, because I think at the start, when you've got a few employees, or even if it's just on your own, you're doing everything, aren't you? You're doing everything from sales to marketing to delivery to operations. You're doing absolutely everything. How many employees do you have?
Now we're sitting at 22 that are with us in the company, and then some freelance facilitators and resources around the globe.
Yeah, and do you have managers of those people? Do you have that tier in between you and the doers? I'm very much on the E-Myth mentality. You have the
Yes.
entrepreneur, the operations guy, and then the doers.
So effectively now 3 key partners, and then below us we're building the management layer, so operations manager, sales and marketing manager, and currently looking at building up a product manager.
Amazing. So for you, a business mindset is making sure that you can get to the point where the business works for you, and is lifestyle important to you, or are you more an empire builder, would you say?
I think it's, for me, I don't think they're separated. I think it's very important to have lifestyle. But to put it in context, I think the key thing is to understand, and you're saying it now, Mark, when we start out in business, every dime spent is not a dime kept. So we're always thinking about, let me just do it myself. But that's at the cost of growth. Because the reason you employ people is not to help grow your business, is to free you up so you can grow your business. And often we don't see it that way. My hardest hire was my first hire, which was an executive assistant. And that took me way too long to do. So very transparent. There was 2 years ago that I said, maybe I need someone to help me just with my admin and email. And from that, we've been able to scale our growth because now I have the one asset I can't get back, which is time.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you for your openness. Tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
I started my life as an engineer. It wasn't my fault. I come from a Dutch family, and generally you got to be an engineer. Unfortunately, my dad passed when I was quite young. I was 12, but I grew up watching Airwolf, Knight Rider, and MacGyver. So I thought
Right.
I thought that's what I was going to be doing. And I went into engineering. I did well, but I didn't enjoy my job. And then I read a book called "You're Born an Original, Don't Die a Copy," and it's a great book
Nice.
because every chapter is one page, so it feels like progress. But it said if you passionately hate what you're doing for more than 2 weeks, stop. And I was pretty much unhappy for about a year or two, and got out of engineering and went into sales. Very long story short, fired from my first 4 sales jobs, and I got frustrated because I did everything they told me to do. I knew the product. I was the world's best talking brochure. They told me to be more motivated. I was the world's most exciting, best talking brochure, but I didn't understand people. And then I got a job interview, and someone said to me, Al, is sales a job or a career? And I interviewed the right answer. No, sales is a career. And he said, how hard have you studied for this career? I said, I'll tell you something, Al. Sales is the best paying, hardworking job and the worst paying, lazy job. Treat this like a profession. Keep studying for the rest of your life and you'll succeed. And I said, okay, what do I read? He said, read books on psychology. And that's where everything changed. Went into sales, bought a sales training company, realized sales training wasn't working because of sales managers weren't being developed. So we went into the niche of sales management development.
So why did you decide when you were moving from engineering into another profession? Why did you choose sales?
It was interesting. It wasn't by design. Pretty literally walking the street, and a mate pulled over in his car and said to me, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I told him, he said, "Why don't you come try it for us? We've got a sales team. I think you'd be good at it. You're good with people." And I thought, "Oh, that makes sense. Let me try it out." You can imagine my mother, because she was going, "You're a what? Didn't you just study to be an engineer?" But yeah, that was the transition. And then there was a point I knew I always could go back to engineering. And Mark, I'm sure you've had this in your life. I'm sure many of the business owners on the call have. There's a time you actually have to burn that option if you think you're going to make it as an entrepreneur. It's great to have an education to fall back on. Great that you maybe can get employed. But at some point, you've got to go, okay, I'm not going to keep stepping back into the safety net. I've actually got to make something of this. And that turning point is critical, painful, but critical.
And you said about psychology.
Hmm.
So maybe what did you study to get yourself? Because it sounds like it's emotional intelligence as well, rather than just understanding people and the psychology of people and how they act when they're on sales calls. Is that where you were looking for inspiration for education?
Yeah, Mark, very openly, I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I still read about 60 books a year that are nonfiction. Just trying to understand. I'm a curious being. I think one of the first ones that were key was a book by Dr. Martin Seligman called Learned Optimism. And they realized that the number one predictor of sales success was the ability to be optimistic, because we have to believe that everything we do might be a positive outcome. We can't give up. And then I looked at it and I thought, that's not a skill. And then the more I studied selling, I realized that selling is really much more about our mindset and our character, or what I like to call it's values selling versus value based selling. So I know you got to sell value to your clients, but what are your values? And I can go on like this. I won't bore your audience, but effectively, it was really understanding human beings and our own mindset. So things like I'll tell myself every day, selling won't help, but helping will sell. It would be borderline negligent for me to deny them this value when I've got to do a cold call. So it's always about managing your own mindset and the stories you tell yourself. So it was that, and then emotional intelligence, knowing how to communicate, tonality, and all the other things. But a lot of the things, Mark, come from intent. If you have the right intention, and your intention is to serve and value, you can build a business by being a good salesperson. The challenge is then you become the business. How do you then take that next chapter in your life, which is the business has to work for you?
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll get there in a minute about how we can get businesses working for us. I just want to delve a little bit deeper into that idea of sales calls.
Mm.
So there's probably people listening, watching at the moment, thinking, "I've got a great product. I think it can do amazing things, or service, but I'm not like I've made 5 calls today." And we all know that when it comes to sales, it's a numbers game. You need the volume in most cases, unless they're warm sales. How would you help a budding entrepreneur keep on picking up the phone even when they're being told every time?
There's two parts to that. So if you think about the skill versus the number, the challenge with the number is if you're just picking up the phone, and if let's say I was managing a sales professional and I said, listen, it's just the numbers, go and pick up the phone more often. What I'm actually saying is, you suck. Why don't you go suck in front of more customers or potential customers? You got to look at the skill and the messaging. That's where psychology comes in. So I use something specific, and if you need me to send it to you to share with the audience, but it's called an initial value promise. So I say I've recently been working with people like you. So I mentioned their title. I've recently been working with sales directors in the pharmaceutical industry. So I'll use the industry. Immediately I've got 2 points of reference. And the person goes, but wait a minute, I'm a sales director in the pharmaceutical industry. And then I talk about their goal. We're trying to find ways to get a larger portion of their sales team performing. And they go, oh, that's me. But are struggling to, even though they've invested in technology and training. Oh, well, we've done that. But we've still helped them able to grow by 36%. Is that something that's relevant to you? And if they say no, you say, thank you for your time. Often they say yes. And many times they say, oh, you know what? That's not actually my problem. My problem is. And people are trying to turn down cold calling. I call it proactive calling, but no one else is picking up the phone, Mark.
Yeah.
We go up against some big players who have massive sales teams who are all doing LinkedIn reach outs and doing email
Yeah.
reach outs. When I was picking up a phone and say, hey, listen, I've been working with heads of operations in large manufacturing companies who are struggling to find optimization in their supply chain, even though they've invested in lean marketing and SAP systems. Yet then someone's listening. So you got to find the
Yeah.
relevance. Relevance is the currency of value.
And so I still do sales calls, a few a week with I've got a podcast guesting service, and I found a massive change in response when I wasn't rushing to the features or the benefits of the service. I was asking more questions and moving the conversation on from the successes, the way that people have been
Mm.
successful with using our service, which was a massive game changer. Like, it feels, and I was talking to someone purely about sales recently, and they said that whole idea of features or benefits in a sales call is very old fashioned now. It's deemed a sort of old-fashioned way of approaching. How, like you said, you're building on reference points when you're talking.
Yeah.
It how does someone structure that conversation where they can get the most out of that
So
interaction?
the first thing we need to understand is the brain has something called a reticular activating system. Simply put, it's the bodyguard at the door of your mind. When you're calling someone, the brain's trying to find a link. The minute you sound salesy, I call it the feature advantage benefit avalanche. You would have experienced this. You pick up a phone, and before you can see if they're speaking to the right person, you've been on for 3 minutes listening to something, you don't know who they are and what it is. So the first thing you want to do is set context. Hi Mark, my name's Alan. I'm from Growth Matters. We have not met. I don't ask how you're doing, because how should I ask how you're doing when I don't know you, and they would be disingenuous. I immediately said context. My name's Alan. I'm calling from Growth Matters. We have not met. The reason for my call, and then you have to drop 2 pieces of relevance to get past the bodyguard. And the 2 pieces of relevance I normally use is industry and role. But it could be, if you're listening to a radio, you tuned out, Mark, you're not listening to the radio, driving on the highway. And then I'm driving, let's say it's me, I'm driving down the highway, and they say, have you just turned 50 and feel fat? And I'll be listening to that radio because I identify as 50 and fat. So it finds relevance. So you got to meet people where they're at. You don't want to go, and you look at these LinkedIn reach outs that you get, it is disgraceful to the profession. But it's just finding, firstly, just practically get those 2 pieces of relevance. So I've
Yeah.
recently been working with owners of podcast companies who are trying to find ways to increase their, and then you can build on that. So the first
Yeah.
thing is, what are the 2 pieces that get them to go, wait a minute, that's me. Then you want to go, what's the outcome they want? What's the goal they likely? Now remember,
Yeah.
it may not be right, but what's the goal they like to do? Who have been trying to
Yeah.
achieve this,
Yeah.
but are struggling to, even though they've done this, and then bringing that together. So I've recently been working with people like you in industries like yours, 2 points of relevance, who've been trying to achieve something, but have been struggling to, even though they've invested in this and this, or been struggling to because of, yet we've been able to help them to change something by a certain number. And then the golden question, is that relevant to you? because relevance is the currency of value. Is it relevant to you? And if they say no, you just say thank you for your time. I don't need a tactic or technique, because if that punchline is not relevant, stop wasting their time, stop wasting yours. Often they say yes, tell me more, and then you don't go into feature, advantage, and benefits. And often they go, oh, it's interesting you say that, but that's not actually our problem. Our tech's working, our training is working. We seem to have a morale problem. And then at least we're having a conversation.
So you set up Growth Matters in 2019.
No,
Is
we
that
were
right?
actually set up in 2013 to redesign the business in 2019, or just pre 2020 when COVID hit. But yeah, we've been going since 2013.
And what was day one like for you with Growth Matters in 2013?
Day one was quite easy, and I'll tell you why. I always believe that if you're getting into a business, make your first sale first. So I had been moonlighting on this vision of a sales management development program. I'd built out a blueprint. I had some context. A client reached out, said, "Do you have anything?" I said, "This is what I'm working on." And they said, "Cool, let's do a pilot." We did a pilot. They gave us the contract and we started the business. So it was an easier in than having to bootstrap my whole life. But just context to the audience, I'd gone bankrupt twice before that. So I'm a very slow learner. So it wasn't just that; it just happened, and it's been a hard 10 years until I did mindset change of I can't keep being the business. It can't be my personality. It can't be my purely my passion. If I want to build something that has legacy and meaning beyond my presence.
So fast forward to 2019, was that
Mm.
the moment you started hiring, started taking, not being the cornerstone of the business and bringing other people involved?
I would love to say that's true. That was definitely the mission that I failed at dismally. When COVID hit, my map of the world initially was my job is to get into planes, fly to countries, put people in a room, and train them. Working backwards, who's going to spend money on training or put people in a room or get on planes? So I didn't have a clue how the years we had built up some momentum was going to work. And then 3 days later, I said to myself, what's the one thing you can do? Keep having relevant conversations. And then I had to employ people because I had to build this as a product, not as a person. We had to rethink all of the learning from a virtual delivery perspective. And then we were blessed that we got to keep two of our international clients who were comfortable to move all the learning to virtual. But a bit of luck. But because of that, I struggled to get my hands out the gearbox. The engineer in me always wants to be fiddling around in there. So it took me a little bit longer, probably closer to 2022, that I really started elevating away from the staff I'd employed and letting them free me up to grow.
So what does your business look like now? It's 45 countries, 22 employees. Is the makeup of them mainly admin and sales trainers?
So effectively, just clarifying, so we're not in 45 countries as a presence, but we work with clients and have trained people in 45 countries. We
Okay,
head office in a small island called Mauritius because of the benefits from a tax perspective, so it makes sense.
right.
Um, and then we have representative offices in the US, Europe, and Australia. So our core team is your operations, so making the customer experience work, sales and marketing, so making sure people know us and we can close the deals, and then administration and support. So things that fill up your calendar but aren't your highest and best use. And then outside of that, we have facilitators. We just have one rule: a facilitator has to have carried a bag and been a sales manager, because we don't believe you can carry the real kind of message of the complexities of sales management unless you've been in that seat.
Yeah. Who is your ideal client? Who are the people that you're targeting when you're looking to build your business?
So when we started, the idea was let's find. So we were based in South Africa at the time, or head office here. Let's find local businesses that have a global presence, deliver so much value locally that they introduce us to their counterparts internationally. That's how we
Right.
won at the time NTT Global. That's how we won Cummins International. We really created the local presence. Now we're a lot more targeted. We understand the industries. So IT, services, and manufacturing are our sweet spot. And then we target named logos. So I'll work on the top tier, building what we call our core seven global clients. Fortunately enough, we signed Adobe this year. So it's a big international client. And that is the one win that COVID brought, Mark. Before that, I'd have to go sell to people in person. I'd have to be on
Hmm.
planes all the time. now it's very
Right.
acceptable to sign big global contracts having not sold to someone. I've still got to go deliver and do a pilot and build a use case. But for your audience listening, the win now is it's acceptable to sell globally, even if you're not in country.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. That is. See, there's lots of advantages of Zoom and
Yeah.
various other tools for that exact purpose.
Not
I
even the
do.
tools, Mark, it's the mindset. Previously, the tools were there. We had WebEx, no one
Yeah.
used those. No, you got to meet me in person. You got to come see me. So trying to grow a global business was actually harder pre-COVID than what it is now, in the
Yeah.
sense that there's a moment I've got to get on a plane, but by that time the deal is very far advanced and it's negotiation conversations. It's not right in the beginning, hey, let us tell you about who we are. I also think what's changed is it's not, oh, but who's this little company out of South Africa? It's, well, who are your international clients? That's really what they want to know.
Mm. And I do feel though, and you are absolutely right. Most of my business is done on Zoom, talking to people, meeting people, connecting on networking events, connecting with people. But I do think there is a thirst for face to face stuff that's starting to evolve. I don't think we'll ever go back to initial conversations and like numerous flights to said country to do a deal. But I do think people are now thirsting for more face to face stuff. Is that what you're seeing? Because especially in sales is done mainly on the phone or on Zoom calls anyway. But
Yeah.
do you feel that there's now a bit of a backlash towards more face to face again?
I definitely feel that, and I'm happy with that. I think the big win, Mark, is companies filter virtually first. So before, what
Mm,
would happen is 20 people would go see the customer in person with their message. What
mm,
companies now do is they're filtering down to one or two virtually, and then
yeah,
there's value in getting in a plane because I know I'm one of two or three players in the deal.
yeah,
And we think that's important, especially if we're not in country, because if our competitors are going and pressing flesh eye to eye, toe to toe, we want to do that too. But the win is you don't have to do that when there's 29 people or 50 people bidding for the
yeah.
business because they've already filtered out. They've met you online. They like your messaging. So it's a more secure investment when you then get on their plane and go and do that. And then just
Why
interesting
did
on the training side, there's a massive shift back to in classroom because although we
yeah,
managed to deliver really good content virtually, the one thing that lacks is the quality of the peer to peer learning.
yeah,
It's still
I
there,
agree
but
with
it's
that.
not at the same level that happens when you bantering in a
Right.
room together.
I want to explore that. One of the questions that just was sprung to me when you were talking was, why did you initially and why do you target international companies?
Higher return on effort. So what you find in many cases is a lot of the companies are federated internationally. So if I'm trying to win a sales management development program in South Africa, it's very difficult if they've already got a preferred provider internationally. However, it's not impossible. I can go build a case
Mm,
study if they got nothing. So a lot of the ways we enter the global companies is we'll do a regional pilot. Adobe, we did a regional pilot in Australia and Singapore, and then we were able to win the global deal. Often that was just working in South Africa, but it's just volume. Once you've got an
mm,
organization to go, you are our sales management development partner, I've got a
yeah.
long tail of business. And then I've got brands that I can use to further scale our message.
Why do you think a lot of sales techniques are misunderstood by businesses, entrepreneurs, normal people?
I think there's a couple of things. One, I think Hollywood does a wonderful job of making us look like we're evil. We snort cocaine, and throw dwarfs at dartboards. If Wolf of Wall Street is what we're about, so there's not a great perception. So many times we talk ourselves out of it. We're going, "I'm not a salesperson." But there's two people I want to call on here. There's a lady by the name of Lisa Earl McLeod. She wrote a book called Selling with Noble Purpose. Everybody's got to read that. The top producers in the world sell with noble purpose, and that then changes how you look at selling. Then
What
one
do you
of
mean by
your
noble purpose? Sorry to cut across you. Just
It's
explain that
exactly
in a
what it
bit
is.
more
It's
detail.
saying that it's not the techniques and the methodology and the body language hack and the black pen versus blue pen. It's not that. It's actually your character and your values. What is your noble purpose? Because the neuroscience of persuasion and the neuroscience of manipulation are exactly the same neuroscience. The only difference is your intent and if you're noble. And there's a Englishman, Philip Squire, runs a company called Consalia. Also good to have him on. He's had a great entrepreneurial journey. But Philip wrote a book and he's done the research. The reason customers don't buy is how you show up as a human. They were too pushy, they were too product centric, they were unethical, it's character things they talk about. When they say, no, I connect with Alan, I could feel this trust. Obviously, you've got to have a good product. Those things, fait accompli, it's got to be in place. But the reason we have the skepticism is we think it's a manipulative dark art, when in actual fact, it's the essence of human behavior is to persuade. It's just what's your intent. I know that companies can't get the scale they need without their sales managers. So I'm on a mission, and it's negligent if I'm not on that mission. So when I sell, it's a secondary component to what I'm trying to do. So I think we're too busy teaching salespeople the mechanics of selling and not the virtue of selling.
Interesting. How was the delivery side of your sales to teams? How was that? So just tell me a little bit more about that. What's the structure of it, whether it's online or face to face? How do you do that? How do you teach? What's your sort of sweet spot on teams? Is it
Yeah.
a team of 5, a team of 10, team of 20?
So
How do you
anywhere kind of
deliver?
12 to 24. 12 gives you a lot of peer-to-peer learning. Over 24, you start to lose some of the room, and it's just because of the peer-to-peer learning. If you've got 24 in a room, you've got 4 groups, 4 feedback cycles on every exercise. It's very different when you've got 50 people in the room. So it's just a timing thing. But once again, Mark, I used the neuroscience I'd studied. So we use a model called, you first have to give them meaning. Why should I care about this training? Then you have to
Mm,
give them a model, basically a new way of looking at the world or new way of looking at something like pipeline health or deal success or selling. So you've got to sell them on a new way of thinking. Then you have to give them a basic method, 3 steps. This is how you do this well, because we don't need more complexity in our lives. However, then doing those 3 steps have some nuances, and we call that the mechanisms. So, what are the mechanisms of executing the steps? And then we have post coaching. So our program runs for a year. We then coach them after the session. We have execution plans. We have an online just in time learning platform to drive the engagement. We're really focused on making sure they apply. But the sweet spot would be our behavior changes when our thinking changes. And a lot of training is information dump, it's not a shift in thinking.
So are you looking to actually do a mindset shift with some of these salespeople to kickstart them into adding value, thinking about the client rather than just communicating ineffectively?
Yeah, spot on. And the way we explain it seems harder than what it is. If you've read any of the work of David Rock, changing people's mind is much easier than changing their behavior. But the way you do that is you got to give them new frameworks of thinking. So the way he explains it is frameworks are like smart apps for the brain. Right now, David, you're using Map Studio Maps on your phone. It's not connected to a GPS. It doesn't give you live information, but you're doing it because that's what you know. But if I could install in your brain a Google Maps, you would stop using the old map almost immediately because you got a new frame of reference. So everything's about frameworks of thinking and then the meat around it. But for example, most companies in sales talk about pipeline health. If you've got £1 million target, you need £4 million or £3 million in your pipeline. That's one lens. A real healthy pipeline has volume, enough money, value, enough money, volume, enough deals for contingency, velocity, enough stuff moving forward. So I'm upgrading their software so that the behavior changes. Is the simplest way I could put it.
Yeah, amazing. How do you think you've evolved as a leader?
I would argue that I've just become a leader. I can rally people, but I've never wanted to manage people or lead people. It was part of my inability to scale was let someone else manage it and let someone else do that. So I think the evolution was a new mindset. I have value to bring to these people. They have their own growth journey that they're on, and they are assets in my business that free me up to grow the business and go to the next level of maturity as a business owner. So I've embraced that, good feedback from my people. But I think the maturity is the decision that I need to, because I can be a great leader of my product. As you can hear, I'm passionate about what I sell. I can be the good sales guy, but I was never focused on, but what about them? The big shift in leadership is deciding I need to do this.
So you don't feel a natural affinity to lead or lead people?
It's interesting with
but
marketing,
you're
I feel
working
I
on
do,
it.
but it's almost like I don't want to manage them. I just want them to show up and do what they need to do. And we will realize if common sense was common practice, we wouldn't need leadership and management. So it needs
Yeah.
to be there. And I enjoy people, I think, but it's the stories we tell ourselves. The story I told myself is I'm sure I could be a good leader, but I don't want to build a business of people. And the reality is, why else build a business than other to have a whole, what I call disciples of your vision. That's what you want to
Mm.
create. People are going, oh, this is what we want to do. I love the way you do this. But I had to change my narrative, change my software to go, hey, wait a minute, this is critical to business growth. Even though we teach it, I was never someone who wanted to apply it.
And you said earlier that you're building a layer of management of
Yes,
your people. So is that partly because of your lack of wanting to lead, like manage people, or is that strategically to take your company to that next level, you need that layer of management in between the
it's
leaders
yeah,
and the people?
it's definitely the latter. It's the quote from Dan Martell that says, the reason you employ people is not so you can grow your business, it's so that it frees you up to grow your business, because
Mm.
80% done by someone else is better than 100% done by you. And
Yeah.
if you don't think like that, and you're a perfectionist, and you're an engineer, and you're proud of the babies you gave birth to and the products you built, it's hard to take that step back and go, you can't always do that. Great
Mm.
hairdressers don't automatically run great hair salons. Great chefs don't
Yeah.
automatically run great restaurants. And
Yeah.
great product creators and salespeople don't automatically become great business owners. I've had to
Yeah.
shift where I'm focusing my own growth to run a business that has people that run people.
Yeah. What would you say your risk appetite is?
Mine is negligent, would be the word, meaning not negligible, negligent. I will risk anything on everything. And then fortunately, I've got a business partner who's the extreme opposite. So, I want to take the biggest risks. I want to swing the bat. And he wants to go, no, no, let's make sure on every line is crossed and I is dotted. So we make a good partnership. But
Yeah.
for me, it's let's burn everything and go. This is fun. But I think I'll call it mature, not getting older. As I mature, I'm a bit more conscious of those rogue approaches I sometimes had.
So briefly, just tell me about a couple of bankruptcies, that sort of gone skin. Just maybe don't go into detail about what
Yeah, I
happened,
mean,
but
to
what did
put
you
it,
learn from it?
yeah, it's interesting because when I stepped away from it, the question was, what is the lessons I take? Because I can't take the beating up of it. I'll tell you this, everyone almost shares these stories like they're romantic. They're not romantic. Having your electricity cut, having your car towed away in front of your children, there's nothing about that feels good as a man. There's nothing about that looks back and says, oh, I would have done it all the same. I 100% would not have done it the same. It was my negligent, almost intellectual brain that thought I could smart my way out of this. And I didn't think about things like I didn't have maturity, I didn't have business experience, I didn't have financial management skills. When I lost my dad, I was pretty much had to fend for myself. So I always thought I can do it. And I just made negligent decisions. And often what I did, listening, if your audience is listening, is I created the product before I created the demand. And that's a big one. I knew what I had was great, but by the time I needed to create the runway, I had no pipeline. It was still
Mm.
6, 7, 8, 9 months out from when I was going to get the pipeline. So everything I'd built had burnt my cash flow. So I was
Mm.
dead in the water before I started. And then the second time round was, when I say a bad partnership, not anyone did anything evil, but we're operating two different directions. And as a result, we had a disagreement with the license holder, and the license holder basically said, long story short, I won a big global deal. The license holder said, that's our deal. I said, no, your contract says it's mine. They said, that's fine. They waited out 90, and it wasn't 90 days, a month and a half, and said, oh, by the way, your contract's up for renewing. We're not renewing it. Um,
Ooh.
and that's where Growth Matter started, because that exact same client that was part of that then said, what are you doing around sales management? So in the moment, though, nothing sexy about it, Mark. There's nothing that says to me when
Yeah.
I hear these stories and people tell you it's great. It is debilitating. And I'm not saying this just because I'm a man, but for a man, it's debilitating to go through that. And especially that last one, because of all of the hope. I'd done the work, I'd done the right things, I'd laid the groundwork, I'd positioned it. But guess what? I learned a lesson about legal. You know, Robert Kiyosaki always says your first two employees are your tax consultant and your legal advisor,
Yeah.
which I didn't listen to. Of course, I read the book, but I didn't listen to it.
And There's a question I ask, and I don't know if we've covered it there with the bankruptcies, but what would you say your biggest challenge has been? Is it a mindset thing? Is it going through the tough times? What's that one thing that you just, like, maybe you are glad you went through it because it gave you perspective of how to do it right this
Mm.
time around?
Look, when I say I would love to have gotten the lessons without the experience. We always tell our kids, don't learn from your mistakes, learn from mine. They're going to go
Yeah.
learn from their own. It's the unfortunate flaw of you being human. We learn through that failure. But I was also negligent and somewhat arrogant in my youth. What are you going to tell me? I'll manifest this. But that's great, Al, but it's not your contract. Um, but I think for me, the biggest challenge has always been doing the job until you get the job. And what I mean by that is you got to act like a global business before you're a global business. You got to have the internal confidence that I can get on a stage with massive competitors. I can be in a bid with massive competitors, and I'm not flinching because I know the value I can bring. Whereas in the past, because of those failures, I'd often be second guessing myself and be going, oh gosh, am I pushing too hard here? Am I going into the wrong den and messing with the big boys? Or is this right? So I think for me, it's always been, I don't like the word imposter syndrome or the concept or identity of it, but it was that piece of you that's going, you're a guy from the East Rand of South Africa. What are you doing
Mm.
in this arena? And I've done a lot of work in the last year and a half on shifting that and going, I can
Yeah.
create value. I create value. Let me be out there. So mindset's so critical. I'll say to all your people, all your audience, wherever you can get help, wherever you can get someone mentoring, coaching, go on training, invest in yourself because you're just going to learn the lessons quicker that way.
Yeah. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision you've made?
To hire an executive assistant.
That first hire,
Yeah,
game
it
changer.
wouldn't be my wife because she's now my ex-wife. So it was,
Okay.
it was my first hire,
What's
executive
the
assistant.
All right? What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
It was from Glenn Crick, my sales manager. If this is a profession, treat it like a profession and
Mm,
study it. It changed the entire trajectory of where I was going with my life.
mm, mm. And I think that's absolutely right because it's one of those things that whether it's a mindset thing, whether it's a professional thing, whether it's a business thing, I often urge people on my show and listeners on my show that you need to be curious. You need to be trying to explore things, whether that is through books, podcasts, mentoring, coaching, whatever it is. You should be trying to have that growth mindset and be better than you were yesterday. So I think it's a really valid way of outlook on life to be able to build yourself as much as build your business to be successful.
Yeah, Mark, I think you touched on something, and I know it's going to sound nuanced, but it matters in my current chapter. Sometimes what you're learning doesn't make you better, it just makes you different. It just makes you think differently because we don't know,
Mm,
nothing's this linear line up or this linear line down. But when you're
mm,
curious, you got context, you got different things you can think about, different areas. And
yeah.
I'll be gung ho certain of something today, and a week later, I'll be in a different place, which was
Mm,
another good piece of advice I got, which was have strong opinions loosely held.
yeah. Love that. Absolutely love that. We have covered this, but maybe give another shout out. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
I can't think of a person that would be stand out on their own. There's just too many people to think about. If it's someone if it would be someone I haven't met that has aggressively challenged my mindset regularly, it would be Tony Robbins, just because of how it makes you rethink and reframe your brain. But
Sure.
no one specifically in the journey. It's been a lot of kind of learning through stupid decisions. So probably my best teacher would be the right answer.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about a regret that you have.
Not giving myself the agency to believe I could have bigger conversations sooner. So I think a lot of what happens in selling and in business growth is we don't give ourselves permission to be bigger. We tell ourselves stories of, is this greed? What's enough? You're already sacrificing so much. I think that'd be the big regrets. And because of that, sacrificing a lot of time for growth, which could have been done by other people if I wasn't so adamant I had to have my hands in the gearbox. We don't get time back. We only, everything else you can get back.
Yeah. What are you most proud of?
I am most proud of the company I've built. It is my passion. What we're doing now and the last 2, 3 years of growth has just been, and I'm proud of what we're doing. I'm proud of what we stand for. I'm proud of Growth Matters.
Amazing. Tell me something that most people don't know about you.
A couple of things. I got the highest maths mark in the country, so I had a brain. I used to love playing chess. And what else went there? Oh, I'm an excellent karaoke singer. If you give me a microphone outside of a podcast, I'm going to be belting out some tunes for sure. Give me a couple months
What's your
with it.
go-to song?
The more I drink, the better I get. At least my ears feel
What's your
better.
What's your go-to song, Alan?
It'll be Hold Back the River.
Oh,
Hold back
yes.
the river, let me look in your eyes.
Oh, amazing. What does legacy mean to you?
That my life is measured by my eulogy and not my will.
Explain that a little bit more.
So that the measurement of my life is not what I leave behind for others, but what other people say on the day I die in my eulogy. That for me is
Amazing.
legacy. Whether I leave nothing material, the measure is my eulogy. How did I show up
Yeah,
for other people and what did I mean in their lives?
that's amazing. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you and find out more about you and your business?
Most active on LinkedIn, and it's easy to find me because there's only one Alan Versteeg in the world because no one else wants that surname. And I'm sure when my parents named me Alan, it was before Hollywood made Alan the idiot in every movie and every TV show. From Hangover all the way to Barbie, there's always an Alan, and he's the dumbass. It's not hard to forget me, Alan Versteeg.
It's memorable. It's memorable,
Yeah.
Alan. Thank you so much for your time today, Alan. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been really fascinating hearing about your story as well as your business. So thank you for being on my show.
Thank you again for having me, Mark. Keep well.
Pleasure. I really hope you've enjoyed that content. It's a really fascinating interview that I've done there. So please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a like. Please do give a subscribe. It'd be really good to boost the subscriptions. It really makes a difference to the algorithm in YouTube. So thank you for that. If you do hit subscribe, hit the bell icon and you'll get all of the content. You'll get notified when all the content is available. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks a lot.